I sat in the living room holding my coffee cup and listening to the peaceful rhythm of the rain outside. The drops on the window felt like a melody. These were usually the moments when my loneliness hit hardest. Daniel often traveled and I was left alone in this big quiet house. But today was different. My stepson Arthur had come back. He'd been studying software engineering abroad for 2 years and now he was finally home. His return stirred something inside me. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew I was feeling some kind of complicated excitement when I heard footsteps coming from the hallway. I tightened my grip on my coffee. Velma, he called. His voice carried the energy of being 21, but there was also this calm, confident tone to it. I'm here, Arthur. Welcome back. I'm Milan, I said, trying to make sure my voice didn't shake. When Arthur came in, I noticed he looked so different. His black t-shirt fit him perfectly, accentuating his slender frame. His black t-shirt fit him perfectly, accentuating his strong, athletic build. His hair was short and tidy and his features were sharper, more mature. But what really got me was the confidence in his eyes. This new version of him surprised me and made me unconsciously take a deep breath. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so I can share more fascinating true stories. Watch this video to the end because the story is going to be incredibly interesting. I used to think of myself as strong and independent. Life had thrown a lot at me after being widowed at a young age, but I'd got through it. Arthur's return brought those suppressed feelings to the surface. I hadn't expected it to affect me this much. Every time I looked at him, memories of quiet moments when I longed for the past would pop into my mind. Arthur sat down on the couch and looked at me. I can't even explain how much I've missed this house, he said, putting down his coffee cup. Everything is still the same. I smiled, but it was a smile mixed with the sadness of remembering how the past 2 years can change a thought. It's crazy to see how much that shy little boy has grown up, I said, trying not to stare at him for too long. I turned my attention back to my coffee. It was impossible not to notice the sparkle in Arthur's eyes. He smiled slightly and said, "But you haven't changed, still the same graceful Velma." His words made me feel both proud and a little uneasy. I glanced at him briefly. The expression in his eyes was strong enough to keep me frozen. I had a feeling deep down that this could turn into something that crossed boundaries, but in that moment we both silently accepted each other's presence. There was this quiet tension between us, something unspoken, and this was just the beginning. I wanted to do something special for Arthur's return, so I chose my favorite dress from the wardrobe. A red wine-colored one that hugged my figure perfectly, stopping just above my knees. I carefully styled my hair and let it fall over my shoulder and applied light makeup. As I looked into the mirror for a moment, looking at myself in the mirror, I could see that I hadn't changed at all. I looked in the mirror for a moment and imagined I was someone else. Deep down I knew I'd done all this for Arthur, but I quickly tried to push that thought away. After all, he was just my stepson. As I walked downstairs, Daniel still hadn't come home from work, but Arthur was there. As soon as his eyes landed on me, I could see the admiration in them. Our eyes met for a second, but without saying anything I turned and headed for the kitchen. Everything had to be perfect for dinner by the time Daniel got home. The three of us sat down and the conversation flowed as usual, Daniel talking about work and Arthur telling us about his plans. But without realizing it, I kept shifting my gaze to Arthur. The way he held his wine glass with those strong hands, the way he smiled slightly as he talked, every little detail had me mesmerized. In the middle of dinner, I got up to get some more wine. As I got the bottle from the fridge and was about to walk back to the table, I noticed that Arthur had quietly followed me. He was standing just a step behind me, so close I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. "Velma," he whispered. There was warmth, sincerity in his voice. When I turned to look at him, he locked eyes with me. "Thank you for everything, the food, the table, the warmth of this house. It's all beautiful." But he paused for a moment, letting his gaze travel over me. I didn't know what to say, so I just stared at him. But he kept on going. "The way you're so graceful and amazing has always touched me. I know you're married to a lucky man, but I had to say it anyway." I felt a knot form in my throat. Arthur, for you to say that, I guess I should just thank you, I mumbled, offering a shaky smile. Without saying anything else, I walked back to the kitchen and put the bottle of wine on the table. Daniel was still talking, completely unaware of the tension building up inside of me. My head was spinning. When dinner ended, Arthur got up to clear the wine glasses. I helped him. Daniel was engrossed in his email on his phone, didn't notice the silence between Arthur and me. I avoided looking at him directly, but I could feel his gaze on me. After dinner, everyone went to their rooms. Daniel concentrated on his work for a while, and I was left alone with my thoughts. Arthur's words kept echoing in my head. You're even more beautiful. How could something so simple affect me so much? I couldn't sleep that night. Arthur's return had stirred up an unexpected storm inside me, and I had no idea where these feelings would take me. When I slowly opened my eyes the next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, filling the room. I noticed that Daniel was already gone. The other side of the bed was empty. For a brief moment, I felt a sense of relief. I needed to focus on my daily routine, but Arthur's words from last night just wouldn't leave my mind. As I got out of bed, my robe slipped a little from my shoulders. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw myself in a way I hadn't in a long time. I still felt attractive. Attractive, perhaps more so than Daniel had noticed in years. As I fixed my hair with my fingers, I noticed the slight sparkle in my eyes in the mirror. I paused for a moment, wondering, what am I doing? Why do I feel this way? As I turned to my wardrobe to pick out my clothes, I noticed the door was ajar. The door was slightly ajar. At first I didn't think much of it, but then something caught my attention. I realized Arthur was standing there watching me. For a few seconds neither of us moved. I looked at him, my face a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. He, on the other hand, tried to look away like a child caught in the act. Look away like a child caught in the act, Arthur, I said, my voice a mixture of shock and curiosity. I'm sorry, he muttered slowly. He turned his eyes back to me, his face a little flushed. I couldn't take my eyes off you. It was really unintentional. Despite the weight of the moment, I couldn't stop myself from smiling. I knew he could feel the warmth in my gaze. Don't be so embarrassed, I said, giving him a small smile. Daniel's already gone. It's just you and me this morning. For a moment Arthur's gaze was filled with hesitation. He seemed torn between staying or going. Then something inside me shifted. I realized this was completely under my control. I added a more inviting tone to my voice. I said, come on, let's spend some time together. We could have breakfast, or maybe something else. As those words hung in the air, Arthur slowly moved towards the door. There was a different kind of tension between us now. Stronger than before, but it wasn't frightening. Somehow it was exciting. I could feel his eyes sliding over me as he entered the room. I had no idea what was going to happen, but deep down I knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary morning. Velma felt that strong impulse inside her. Noticing the hesitation in Arthur's eyes, she paused for a moment, but then quickly moved towards him. She reached out her hand. She lightly grabbed his arm, gently guiding him towards the bed. Despite his confused expression, she said calmly and confidently, come on. Let's sit down for a minute. Let's sit for a few minutes. We have a lot to talk about. Arthur still looked at her uncertainly, but Velma gently nudged him to sit on the bed. She joined him there. The space between them shrank and the electricity between them grew stronger. Velma could feel every movement of her body. Something inside her was breaking, and there was no turning back now. Arthur, she said, her voice soft and deep, I'm not just watching you, I'm feeling you too. Do you understand? Arthur tilted his head slightly, his eyes full of complex emotions. It was hard to tell exactly what he was feeling. Velma closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Now was the time to experience this moment. The emotions building up in both of them were becoming clearer by the second, and Velma was not going to just sit quietly. She was going to do much more. I gently pushed her down on the bed and kissed her passionately as she lay on top of me. I never expected this, she whispered as she looked up at me with eyes full of surprise and excitement. I replied in a low, inviting voice, but it feels too good to stop now. As our kiss continued, I could feel him responding to my every touch, my hands slowly sliding under his shirt, feeling his warm skin as I explored his muscular stomach. He let out a soft moan and the sound sent shivers down my spine. "Velma, you're incredible," he murmured, pulling me closer as he ran his hands down my back. I expressed the trust one felt for him, my voice filled with desire. "Then let's not waste any time," he said, grabbing the hem of my silk dressing gown and opening it. I held my breath at the sensation of this sudden opening. "You're so beautiful to die," he said, kissing my neck, lighting a fire inside me. He ran his hands over my body, seducing me with every touch. His warmth stimulated every nerve in my body. I arched my back slightly as a soft moan escaped my lips. With newly found courage, I wanted more and led him. A few hours later, as the wave of passion between us began to fade, we found ourselves comfortably wrapped in each other. We could still feel each other's warmth. We took deep breaths to calm each other down. I could feel the chaos inside me, but at the same time I felt close to Arthur. Every move of his body gave me some kind of peace. My mind was still echoing with the sounds of that moment, caught between the echoes of the past and the uncertainty of what was to come. After a while, Arthur got up and quietly walked to the bathroom. As my eyes slowly moved around the dark corners of the room, a storm raged in my mind. What had I done? How right was it? I felt so different, but there was also a fear in those feelings. Should Daniel know? Or maybe a voice inside me whispered at that moment, maybe it was just a moment. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I held my breath and answered it, his usual calm voice bringing me some comfort. "Hey Velma," Daniel said, "I need to tell you something. I realize I've been neglecting you today. I want to take you out for a romantic dinner tonight. Just the two of us, relax. Share some time together. How does that sound?" My hand held the phone. The phone was shaking. Daniel's words sounded like such a simple and beautiful offer, but the chaos inside me as I accepted his invitation somehow made me feel even more emotionally alone. Did he really deserve this? And what about what happened with Arthur? I was completely lost in this dilemma. "Yes, Daniel," I said, trying to hide the uncertainty in my voice. "I'd love that. It would be nice to spend time with you." When I hung up the phone, all my thoughts collided in my head. I was aware of everything, but at the same time I felt lost. No matter how good I felt, this chaos inside me was becoming more and more of a burden. Daniel's words seemed to offer me some kind of security, a chance for things to fall back into place. But Arthur, that moment, those touches, those eyes, they had pulled me into another world. A voice inside me told me that everything would fall back into place in time. But another voice reminded me that I knew everything now, that everything had changed, and how deep that change was. Daniel at dinner. Maybe tonight I'd close my eyes and believe everything was right. But what about Arthur? Could he? I forgot the moment I shared with him. I slowly sat up and looked out the window. The sun was setting. Everything was slowly getting darker, turning to silence. In that moment I realized that life was like a cycle. Sometimes it's hard to find balance. Sometimes you walk without knowing where your heart is taking you. But one day I felt hopeful that everything would be right, that I would find meaning in myself and my choices no matter what. There was something I had to decide today, in that moment, deep inside my soul, even though I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know what would happen at the end of the night. I accepted the moment life had given me. After all, sometimes the greatest emotional journey begins by accepting, and even if everything was uncertain, maybe meaning was hidden in those complicated moments where we get lost. If you've made it this far, I'm sure you're hooked on the story. There's so much more to come and you won't want to miss it. Hit the follow button and turn on notifications so you can be the first to dive into my next mysterious tale. Your support